Assassin's Creed. The name alone probably got a lot of my listeners right now going, whoa, what's it about? And that was kind of the way me and my brother always reacted to it. It was one of our favorite games for a long time. As history lovers, as gaming lovers, it's a game that, before For Honor, met all of our history combat needs. Hello, everybody. It's Raven Knight here, and I'm here with my brother, Post Commodore. We're here to talk to you about Assassin's Creed, and not just Assassin's Creed, but we want to go through all the major games that were released and rank them. But before we do, let's talk briefly about what Assassin's Creed is, because believe it or not, some of you may not know what it is. So for those of you who don't know, let's quickly go into it. Assassin's Creed is a historical fiction franchise produced by Ubisoft, which tells a story of two factions that have existed throughout world history, the Assassins and the Templars. The Templars believe that humankind is corrupt and evil, and if you leave them to their own devices, they're going to destroy the world. So what they want to do is they want to use special artifacts called Pieces of Eden with powers of persuasion and control to force humankind to do what they want, to live by their rules. Because, hey, better to have an all-powerful big brother keeping everyone at peace than letting everyone decide their own destruction. The Assassins, their main job is to try to fight against the Templars and maintain free will. And this underground war has been going on throughout the years, and according to the game, all the major events in world history have somehow been caused by or affected this underground war. Now, obviously, it's historical fiction, but part of the fun for me as we started playing the game was just imagining what it would have been like if it was real, if this actually happened, what would happen if this was the way history really went? Obviously, it's not, but it's just something fun to contemplate. Now, the reason why I brought my brother along, Post Commodore, is because, he knows history probably way better than I do. He's got the major to prove it. He and I have always enjoyed talking about history, talking about Assassin's Creed. And so the game scratched an itch for him that was definitely prevalent. So I wanted to bring him along for us to grade these Assassin's Creed games. But before we do, Commodore, I'd love it if you briefly told us what it is about Assassin's Creed that you love.
Well, for me, it's I love history. I have since I was in the fourth grade. That was like I really got turned on to it, and I really like playing historical games. That was always fun. But most of the games before I discovered Assassin's Creed were not. They were strategy games, and I love strategy games too. Total War and Age of Empires are some of my favorite series of all time. But if you wanted to actually say play in the mode of like play as the soldier in the battlefield or play like as a guy actually exploring through the historical time period, there were a few titles out there, but they really weren't that big. At least none that I can come up with the top of my head. But I remember I was on a road trip with one of my buddies when I was in middle school, and he was loaning me his PSP because he wanted to show me some of the stuff he had. And the thing he showed me was Assassin's Creed Bloodlines, which was basically a sort of mini sequel to the first Assassin's Creed game. And from there, I just like, this is cool. I want to look further into it. And when we finally did get a 360, Assassin's Creed was one of the first games we got because we wanted to play around with it. And we instantly fell in love with it just because of, one, it was a historical nature. And especially in the later titles, you didn't just play the game, even though the gameplay was fun, you were learning while you played. And so even if you don't have an understanding of history when you play the games, you start to pick it up as you go through it. And that's a beautiful experience when a game series doesn't just give you a good experience, it also tricks you into learning, which is something that most teachers and educators have been trying to replicate.
Yeah. I think that's one of the reasons we love For Honor so much is for the same reason. It's one of those few moments where you can actually play with historical warriors and see them in action and kind of experiment with how they fight against each other. But what Assassin's Creed did was it didn't just give us historical warriors, it gave us points in history to explore, which really was awesome. And part of the fun for us was always just trying to see how historically accurate it was, which is part of what we're going to look at today. So our goal here, we're not going to look at any of the DLC games or the extra little small games that were released. Like, we're not going to look at Freedom Cry or Liberation or the Chronicle series. Look at those. We're going to look at the mainstream games that were released throughout the years since the first one. We're going to grade them on 3 levels. We're going to look at them from a historical aspect. How historically accurate are they? We're going to look at them on how good the story is and how fun the game mechanics are. Like, is it a fun game in general to play? So can't wait to get started. So if y'all are interested, please follow along as we go through Assassin's Creed games. And let's, kind of obvious, but we're going to start with the first one. Assassin's Creed, released in 2007 for PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360. This was the first game I obviously, and you gotta love the whole aesthetic of it, because this set up the stage for everything. The setup is it's 1191 AD, Third Crusade's going on, Holy Land is being torn apart, and so the Assassin's Order is trying to help maintain peace. And you got Altair ibn La'ahad, the main character that you play as. He has to go out and kill people on both sides, Crusader and Islamic Caliphate, and he has to fight to keep everyone at peace, kill who he needs to kill. The whole game in itself, one thing that I love about it from a storytelling perspective, the story of redemption, because he starts out really tough, really bad, cool, but then he's kind of full of himself. He's an asshole, for lack of a better word, and so he has to start over. He gets demoted. He has to begin again and relearn. And seeing him redeem himself while working his way through the game is cool. We see his gradual change. I think personally, but gameplay wise, it's so. It's a little too simplistic for me. But hey, what are your thoughts, Commodore? What do you think?
Well, I kind of have to agree with you there. This gameplay is simplistic, but it was Assassin's Creed, the original title, was supposed to be Ubisoft's answer to the Prince of Persia games. And they wanted to basically sort of just, what if we tried to make it more historical? And they actually did do a good job to try and strive with that, though the mechanics and the historical record sometimes go against each other, like, the Hidden Blade. But like if you look at the original trailer the opening for Assassin's Creed, you'll see that Altair has a crossbow, and since Assassins probably would not have carried those at the time, they actually edited out of the game, so because they wanted to try and keep it as historically accurate as they possibly could.
And did
magical.
they? Because that's a big question. How historically accurate do you think the first game is?
I actually think they did a fairly good job. And like some of the, like a lot of the villains, like we can't get a perfect depiction of them because they obviously weren't part of the deeper evil organization. Or were they? No, they weren't. But the thing is, that's of course, but like I wish we could have seen Salahadin in the game, and I imagine they didn't do it just because they didn't want to step on any sensitivity toes. But we saw Richard the Lionheart, and I actually really like the way they portrayed him as sort of this big, like larger than life character that's like, he's a very pious man, but he is willing to listen to reason. I do like his conversation with Altair at the end of the game. And
it was I like it. Still sticks out with me. One thing that I also like about Assassin's Creed, the first game, and this is going to sound bashed on it for being simple earlier, but I like that the conflict is simple. Think about it. Essentially what it comes down to is it's like Indiana Jones, especially Indiana Jones and the Ark of the Covenant or something like it. You got this artifact that everyone wants, and it's about getting it. And at the end of the story, we see just how dangerous and powerful this artifact is when it falls into the wrong hands. So what I like is we don't have to worry about the complications of precursors or ancient civilizations.
Yeah, the Isu, the Isu is apparently what they're called. But
yeah, whatever they're called. I never liked them being added to the game, and we'll talk about them more when we actually get to Assassin's Creed 2. But right now, what I liked about this is we didn't have to worry about that. It was very much a simple game of assassins versus Templars, killing the people who needed to be killed, working your way through each contract, learning more about the way the world worked and what needed to be done, learning responsibility. It was just a solid story that didn't require a lot of, let's look into the lore to make sure this meets up with everything.
Yeah, well, I have to agree with you there, because this is what I don't understand about the series as a whole, because Assassin's Creed 1 set it up perfectly. And of course, spoiler warnings, but a little late for that now, but just spoiler warnings in general for the entire series. And if you didn't think we were going to bring up spoilers, shame on you.
Shame on you.
But regardless of that, like they set it up at the end when they see like the sort of map where the Piece of Edens are. It's just like, this is now going to be a race between the modern day assassins and the modern day Templars to try and find those pieces, so that the assassins, so they can stop the Templars, and the Templars so they can try and, I believe the original plan was to shoot a Piece of Eden into a satellite in orbit and then use that to control everybody. which, that's a big enough threat on it as its own. That's like shoving everybody into the Matrix against their will. But apparently for Ubisoft, that just wasn't a big enough threat. So an underground evil Illuminati organization, no, that's not. You know what the enemy is? The sun. The literal sun itself, along with some weird ancient alien sort of thing. I feel like they were trying to go with like what the Forerunners were in Halo, but like failed on like 9 different levels.
Well, let's save that because let's stay on topic. We'll get to that.
Yeah,
We'll
get to that. It's just I have a lot of pent up emotions about those jerks.
Yeah, I do too. We're gonna talk about that. We might even need to do just a whole video on why they're stupid. But let's focus on Assassin's Creed 1. Based on what we just talked about, mechanics wise, story wise, history wise, how would we grade it? We're both teachers here. We were both school teachers. If we were to give this a grade, how would we grade it?
I'd have to give this one. I give it a B. I give it a B. It's like not a B plus, not a B minus. It covers its bases. It's good to open up everything up. Story wise is where I believe it's like I believe seeing the character growth of Altair is probably the best. I do love the conversation that he has with the guy in Jerusalem at the end saying like, I can't forgive you because you're no longer the same person that wronged me. You've changed.
Yeah, that's their relationship is good. And I don't mean that in a gay sense. I mean that they worked well together.
Well, consider the culture around there that would have been frowned upon at the time.
Yeah, definitely.
But though there is actually something to say like in Middle Eastern culture, particularly in Islamic culture, since, women have to wear the garb to follow Islamic law, men typically have to unless the woman is in their family or they are married, they actually have to be more connected. They actually have more of an emotional connection with their brothers and their male friends around them. They have they have a much stronger bond than we might associate with in the West.
I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. And so it's probably a much bigger deal like when you see like the guy's brother get executed by the Templars very early on. Not that losing a brother under any circumstances would be pleasant, but just so you know.
Okay, I like that. So let me give it my grade, and then we'll average it out. I would give it a B minus, so around the same area as you. For me, the thing that takes it from a B level, where you put it, is just the simplicity of the mechanics. And so, like, for example, the fact that you can't swim. It's the only Assassin's Creed game you can't swim. And I can't count the number of times I have been running from the guards, running as fast as I can from the guards, and then I'll be running close to a wall. Suddenly, it just decides, all right, the game decides it's time for you to climb. And it's like, no.
No, it's not always that old time. Like, this was a problem for, like, multiple games in the series, but it's just this is such an emotional situation. Wall, hold me. But,
just hug this wall.
And also the combat mechanics, like, they really polish it out in later games, but the combat mechanics in this one, like, early on, it wasn't so bad, but once the guards start to learning how to, like, be able to parry and block and do all other sorts like that, it wasn't as smooth, which I've heard some people argue makes it a bit more realistic. I would argue that with them, but our combat was a little clunkier in comparison. Like that last little fight with Robert de Save, I spent half of the time running around in a circle, making sure I could heal back up before I went back in to fight that monster.
Yeah, no, it was not kind.
Cue your Benny Hill music there.
Yeah, so I think we can fairly give this one a B. I think that Assassin's Creed 2007, a B from us.
Yep, B.